Human, Hannah, Christ, you know, we all have it.
Yeah, it's just been going on too long, that's all.
Yeah.
Anyway, right.
Well, if you want to do this to keep your mind off it for
yeah, exactly.
a minute,
Do you know
but
what?
if you
Work's
want
a
to
great.
finish early, then honestly, please do.
I'll do that for all of us. No, I think work is a great distraction at times. Don't
Yeah,
you,
it can be. Yeah.
From real life. Right. Okay, so back to yeah. There's no listening devices. I don't know. Right. Okay. So in terms of trust and respect in individuals, what I'm going to do, if you, I think it's a personal thing. How do you trust? Like when you're thinking about trusting someone, because you don't think about it, you do it, don't you? Where does it come from? How do we know who to trust? You know, when you think about your own and the people that you trust and those that you don't trust.
I think sometimes
like morals, like if you share the same sort of morals about things.
Yeah. So they share something with you and you understand you've got a connection on there and you've got the same values, do you think?
Yeah, like I think people you don't respect, like if you have values that are quite important to you and they don't respect or have a very different opinion to those values, it's hard to trust them, maybe, because it's nice to be with people on a similar wavelength.
It's easier, isn't it? Because it just everything makes sense then, doesn't it? You have a conversation, you're not trying to establish, but you're not always going to have that, I suppose, are you? But yes, I do. Yeah, understand. Good point. Someone else was saying something. The lady.
Yeah, I was going to say for me it's that if there's any difference between what they say and their actions.
It's a big lot of integrity, isn't it? In terms of yeah, this is what, you know what I'm saying about knowledge, skills and behaviour, and it isn't. Someone said this. They're almost like if someone says to you, I'm recording this, it's a bit bad, but if they go, I love you, I love you, I love you, and then they don't treat you very well, they don't. You know, it's as simple as that, isn't it? So there's something about I've got you back, and then they don't behave like that. So I think everything's got to align, hasn't it, to trust. Do any of you trust too easily, would you say, or do you take a long time to earn, you know, for someone to earn trust for you?
I'm definitely too trusting. Like I just can't see the bad in anyone until it just goes terribly wrong.
No, yeah. So you almost wait for them to prove you wrong rather than.
Yeah. I'd rather.
Quite a nice place to be, isn't it?
Okay. I think I used to be very trusting, and then I had like personal stuff, and now I don't really trust anyone, and I'm really like look out for like the proof of the trust, if you know what I mean, with people. When before I'd be like very trusting and be like just go with it, when now I'm very much more careful with who I trust.
I think that comes with age a little bit for me. Like I've got a bit better. I have been watching that. I don't know whether anyone's seen it on Netflix. That Mindhunter, about like basically serial killers and psychopaths and stuff. And it's like they're all very like polite and upstanding citizens, and then like obviously like then they go and kill a load of people. And now I'm like, good. Oh God, like this person that I know that like anyone I know could be a psychopath or a killer.
It's true though.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at, because for your team to trust and respect you, and I think we had an example of someone who's like a professional code of conduct, so good in terms of setting out your stall of I'll look after you, bear in mind, and you know, and I'll support you in any way I can, but we've still got that, you know, explain boundaries, which work really well. And so when we're looking at how we build the trust up, because it has to be two ways as well, doesn't it? Or does it, do you think, you know, to have a good relationship with say if you've got a leader or if you're managing someone, do you think people can trust you without you trusting them?
I think you can as a manager, because I think with a manager you've got to have that professional head on. So even if you have, I don't know, a member of staff that doesn't like maybe perform well or whatever, so you might have that lack of trust in them as a member of staff, but you've still got to show them in a way that you do trust them. So it can be quite.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because otherwise you could be taken in a sort of HR point of view, couldn't you, for sort of not treating them in a certain way or not giving them equal opportunities to
Yeah.
other people. So it's challenging. Do you believe you can respect someone without liking them?
Yeah.
I think you can, yeah, in a nutshell. Go on, explain. So is there anyone that you respect but you don't actually like them?
There's a few people, yeah, but respect them because on a work level, you know, you possibly aligned with how they deal with work things, but on a personal level, you can think they're a bit of a plonker.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't think you need to like everyone what you work with. Just something. Have you? But there is something about, and I think it comes down to this mutual support. I think there are people that you actually over time you realise what they're good at and you help each other out, and initially you might not have had a great impression of them, but these things can evolve, can't they, in time? It's not necessarily the thing is, I think if we've got a strong instinct, sometimes we need to then spend some time about building a picture rather than having the picture first, because things like this take time to build. This is what I'm thinking. So again, I've got a couple of quotes for you here to look at. Do any of these jump out to you?
I think the first one probably, because it is like when you are around the people that you know you can trust and like, you know, you do, or you're in your best mood maybe, and you feel free to speak
Yes.
the truth because you trust
or your
them.
truth, yeah, absolutely.
Your truth, yeah, and they feel the same with you when there's that good energy around people you trust.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, when you've got that, you don't have to agree. You don't even have to have the same value. Do you know what I mean? You can have different values, different opinions, but actually, there's something. I think this is about respect as well. That means if you feel safe, I think a lot of this is about feeling safe, isn't it? To express or to do things or to feel like if someone explained that if their team got something wrong, you know, that you're there for them as well. That these things happen. But I do think being trusted, it allows you to grow, doesn't it? And shine. What do you think in terms of leaders and trust, and leaders trust, respect, not fear and submission? There are effective leaders who've operated on the opposite, aren't there? If you look at sort of, I don't know, like leaders of certain countries that have done very bad things, it sort of seems to be on fear and submission, doesn't it? But do you think we're moving to a place now where in organisations it is about trust and respect?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's quite common for leaders to say, you know, I trust you to crack on with it, and I haven't come across one personally who has been non-trustworthy, or even if they have been, they haven't vocalized it, played their cards close to their chest. I don't think even if they weren't trustworthy, if they didn't trust people and such, they wouldn't be openly vocal about it, because then they wouldn't be in the position they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think something shifted during COVID. Obviously, a lot of things have changed, but I think there's, in terms of movements of relationship building and integrity, there's been a lot in terms of consumer behaviour, that people will only do business with brands that they really like now and they respect and they trust. Our decisions are founded more on a level of integrity, and I wonder whether we'll see this, if you were doing any research for this report, if you'll see trends in terms of, you know, the growth of integrity, of leadership, authenticity, just the style. You know, I think in the 1920s, you do something because your boss said do it. It doesn't work like that now, does it? Or do you think it does in anywhere? Do you think people still have respect because of rank, or do you think it comes from other things?
Lucy's got her hand up.
Oh, actually, I can't see. I'm sorry. Go on, Luke. Yeah, please speak. Lucy, if you can, or write it down if you can't.
I think in the current climate, you don't really have a choice but to trust your team. You're not sat with them anymore. You can't. You got no eyes on them.
Absolutely. Yep. And actually, if you don't, what are you going to do? You're shooting yourself, aren't you, really? Because they're not going to deliver. Lucy, did you say something?
Yeah, sorry, I did, and then I realised I'd muted myself.
Oh, okay.
I basically going to say I've got back at the beginning of my career, kind of around the time we had the recession. I spent a year at Northamptonshire County Council, and my manager there was very authoritative, and he used to have a managers meeting every Friday morning, and we weren't allowed to bother him or impede on this time on a Friday morning. And I was a lot younger then, and we had a counsellor ring up who started shouting at me down the phone saying, get him on the phone, I want your manager on the phone, da, 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 da. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? I'll just go and stick my head round the door and just see whether he can deal with it. And I went down to his office, and him and another manager were in there, not having a meeting, just eating McDonald's. And that was when I just knew that I could not trust this bloke. And he because he was so, he just came across as so authoritative and professional, and don't bother me, I'm in this very important meeting, you cannot come in this room.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah.
He was just in there eating McDonald's, and then I was just yeah. Okay.
But now, even buildings are set up to almost not give people offices in the same way, are they? Or window, do you know what I mean? You don't there's nowhere to hide anymore, is there, in the same way?
No, I think, yeah.
I think culturally things have changed, do you?
Yeah, the managers are now kind of thrown in with the team now, aren't they? And
yeah, so you can't, have that. Well, that's really bad. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so let's go back to, in terms of, have you heard of Stephen Covey before? Anybody? Because there's Stephen Covey created something. It was the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and at one point in the 1980s, a long time ago, or 90s might have been, it was the most. These were the sort of 7 things to look out for, the guiding principles, because you have management gurus of the time. So this is one where I think you're going to come back to this in a future module and see this again. So let me just slide. Okay. So if we've got a high performing team, it needs to be underpinned by trust. Has anyone actually got in their team? Do you feel like everyone does trust each other? Has anyone sort of got this utopia at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. It's like that in our team. Our manager just kind of tells us to crack on, and then if we need him, we go to him.
Okay, that's really good. Okay. And do you feel like if there's a conflict, you can address that? If anything's going on that you don't agree with, have you got that level of sort of mutual respect?
No.
Okay, well, that's very honest. Okay. Do you feel is everyone committed?
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost there. Is everyone accountable for what they want to do? Okay. And are you all quite results driven?
Yeah. I think the only reason I would say conflict is that it is very top down. So even if you don't agree with a direction, you don't really have the right to say no or change it. So that's the only aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not almost within the team. It's just what's coming.
Yeah, it's just the business in general. Yeah.
Okay. So that's one framework that you could use when you're looking at, because we're looking here about the sort of trust, the results, the underpinning sort of interaction between each other. So you could look at that. What do you reckon about this idea of vulnerability, that if you were to share, like I did just with you, something not very good, do you think then that people are more likely to give something back if you give a little bit, do you think? Have you ever seen this happen or done it yourself, and then actually you start to get on with someone a bit better?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just in general, not even just at work. I think it's just a personal thing, isn't it? Well, what's the word? people skills. Like generally, if you give a little, someone generally gives back.
They do, and if you don't give too much, then you don't feel too vulnerable. But if you
Yeah.
give, if you it makes you easy to connect with, doesn't it? If you show some vulnerability. But this again, this is new world, old world, because actually old world management and leadership was all about protecting from vulnerability, because it was seen as something that was almost like a chink in your armor that could be used against you. Does it make sense? So people sort of almost put on a facade that they were or behaved in a certain way. So yeah, if we've got, how would you create an atmosphere where people are open with each other? Have you got any ideas on what you could do, if you're building your team?
I know this is old school, but prior to COVID, the way that my manager used to do it is that on a Sunday all the vehicles had to be cleaned. So she would do a breakfast, eggs and bacon and sausages and sort of thing. We went out, cleaned the vehicles, and then all came back, and then we all had a team breakfast. That's
nice, that is. And it is sort of everyone's mucking in then, aren't you? And it all feels like that sounds really lovely. Yeah, I bet you miss things like that, don't
you? Any interaction with my colleagues would be great. You don't really see them. I'm unlike any other outstation in the sense that I've got near enough 250 miles of road, so we all pull in to the car as one goes out in a patrol car. Someone
you
comes
spoke
in
last time about this, didn't you? Because you left a profound effect on me, really. Because you talked, didn't you, last time, and said if you were lucky, you might see someone in the car park, and if they talk to you, they might talk to you, but they might not. Was it yourself that said that? It's like, Christ, that's awful. A lot of work. Do you think management will change after COVID, or do you just think it will develop new skills? Or do you think management is changing because what's required to be a good manager?
I think it has changed. I think for people that really rely on seeing what people do day in, day out, I don't know what kind of manager that makes them, like really hands-on managers. I think they've really struggled, and it's been obvious here, and they've had to adapt. And then, like you've had it the complete opposite way, where some managers have gone really laid back, and you don't hear from them. I think it's just making people change rather than get new skills. I suppose getting new skills will make you change, but you completely have had to change your approach.
Perspective, haven't you? But I think it's at a fundamental level that we're seeing change. And actually, you can imagine, so this example of team members who trust each other and are open, if you had a team meeting where people were actually honest about the worst thing that's happened, or the worst thing, what they're finding difficult about lockdown, and I think some of you did talk about sort of almost like a health and well-being catch up every week. If you're open about these sort of things, you've got that, haven't you? That trust is there. And I think there is the ability to connect on a completely different level now with your teammates, manager. I think the reason I think it's changed is I don't think I didn't fully appreciate how important the social aspect of work is, because I was actually fine. I'd got my social thing outside of work, so I didn't feel like I needed it in work. And now it's harder. You realise what a nice benefit that is, isn't it, to seeing people having a little catch up where it feels natural. And it's I suppose through some of the mechanisms you mentioned, it's still there, isn't it, the team meetings and things, but you're not going to see someone over your kettle, are you? Well, if you do, you shouldn't be. You do know what I mean? It's just,
I think to some degree you can feel more vulnerable or weak in trust because you can't necessarily read the things that aren't visible. So normally when you're in a room, or if I'm a manager walking about an office, if I see everyone's got a coat on, I know that the heating's not work. No one's told me that. I've made that as an indirect. So you can often read a situation for a lot of body language and non-verbal communication. And I think when you haven't necessarily got that, I mean, we're all sitting here in a meeting, but there's only yourself with your camera, not criticising anyone, but it's just the observation. That could make you feel vulnerable, but we've all gained trust from that.
Yeah, and that's why it's important that I have that on for that, absolutely for that reason. I would never deliver a session without it on, because otherwise you don't know if I'm listening to you, actually, and that's really important. But yeah, you're not seeing normal cues, they're called. You're not seeing changes in behaviour. If you're doing team meetings, and I know you say about people being more relaxed in their attire and wearing the pyjamas or whatever, I understand that, but you're not seeing if someone doesn't look right, if that makes sense. If there's something, we've got less to go on potentially, and people could be in worse positions, I think, at the moment. We don't know.
I mean, mental health.
Exactly. That's yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just backing
That's what
up.
I was thinking.
It's
Yeah.
exactly. Sometimes you can see if people are generally not very mentally healthy by their appearance and their demeanour and stuff like that. And if you're working remote and with the distance, you can't necessarily see that and check in with your colleagues.
Yes, and yeah, it's just like if people withdraw when they're under stress or when they feel really vulnerable, then actually all this online communication is the perfect way to withdraw, isn't it? Because you don't actually have to do very much, and you can't do your duty of care properly. I suppose that's the reason why you should have one-to-ones. I think it's a more challenging time for managers. I think it's reading between the lines as well, isn't it, as to what's going on and how their needs are and what we can do to meet them.
I felt like when I speak to people, because I tend to call people are kind of more open than even in the office would have been. Like, I'll ring about a piece of work, you end up having a chat of how you doing, whatever, and people I knew but not that close with are actually more open, because you don't speak to as many people. When you do, you get a bit more.
And so I'm not sure if I've told you this already, but last Christmas we had a team meeting. This is like similar to what you're saying. Yeah, we had, so pre-lockdown, and afterwards a number of the team went out for a Christmas dinner, and I didn't go because I've got a young family. I wanted to come back home. I work quite long hours. So it's like, okay, I'll go home because I've already been to a Christmas meal this week, and I regret that so much now, because like the idea of actually being with my colleagues, and Joe, who's taught you for 525, Joe and myself are really different in our approaches, and everything, and sort of we couldn't get on the same page. It was really weird. We just weren't getting on the same page because we just had like things that she finds difficult, I find quite straightforward. Things that she does to make things better, I find unnecessary. We just felt like we were sort of very different in our style. I'll tell you what, since lockdown, it goes back to this thing here: mutual trust. It was mutual support. We've really helped each other. We see how different we are and how good we are, and we trust each other now. And that's happened by online meeting after online meeting every week, having a catch up with her, finding out what's going on, building a relationship. So I think on this idea of trust, it can be built. I don't think it has to be there straight away. I think it can come in time. But I think the key to doing it is vulnerability. Is about people feeling open, being open enough to share something, and then you can start something different. And do you think teams' performance will be different through having a trusted rapport with their colleagues? Do you think they'll perform better if you have got, or do you think it doesn't really matter if you're?
No, I think it's quite important to be trusted, because I know before we used to like record our hours and stuff, and like I never had a problem with it, but a lot of people did when we're in the office recording your hours. And I used to always think, well, why don't you want to record your hours? Is it because maybe you're not doing your hours? But actually now you're like, because people aren't questioning it, you're probably sometimes working more because you're not being challenged or questioned about where you are. You're just getting on with it. The day goes by. Sometimes you do an extra half an hour, whatever. Yeah. Another day you might do half an hour less, but you're performing and getting on with your work and doing your time without being told to do it.
Yeah, okay, because it's almost, you've got to be a self-starter now, haven't you? Because if you aren't, it's hard to support you potentially, or harder maybe. So this could be something that you did at a team meeting, because you start off. the idea is that you start off with something that people feel really good about themselves, so they start off in a good position, and then actually you become a little bit vulnerable, but it just depends on, they can choose themselves how much they want to share on that. Can you see how that could potentially be helpful for a bit of an icebreaker? Or do you think people would feel uncomfortable with it?
I think it'd be both. I think you'd feel uncomfortable with it because all icebreakers are.
They are, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're all really awkward, but I think it would be beneficial, I think, if people did it. Like, because I've suffered with like imposter syndrome quite a bit, so I always imagine everyone in the room is a lot more like intelligent than me and knows a lot more than I do. So sometimes it's nice to know what people struggle with, just so you know you're not on your own.
Yeah, and I think it validates people a little bit, doesn't it? In the sense of that, yeah, absolutely, they feel that it's something else. And I think if someone in your team is a bit of an, I don't know how to say it professionally, that's why I'd never score high on professionalism, is a bit of an arse, really. If they did this and they said, sometimes something I struggle with is, you're more likely to like them, just because they're, do you know what I mean? They're less arrogant. So
Yeah.
Definitely consider it anyway. If you've got something you can do, use it. So have a look at this anyway about building trust and see what you think. Let's have a scan through. What do you reckon?
I was going to say, Kia do this thing where you can like send a little e-card praising like your staff, but I don't know, I just don't like it because it just comes across as forced. Like our manager sent one to the whole team just saying, oh yeah, thank you for all your hard work, and I felt like that she'd been prompted to do it. I think if she'd maybe done it unprompted and a bit more personal, then that would have been good.
Is that the sort of believable bit? You don't believe it's necessarily genuine?
Yeah, I think sometimes you go, oh, you need to, like, they've obviously been told, oh, you need to praise your staff, so they've gone, all right, and then they've gone and done it, whereas it's not genuine.
Yeah, it's almost like one of their objectives, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, if we need it to feel like it's from a genuine place. In this model, do you reckon that leaders have to be, so able really connects back to our knowledge, doesn't it, in terms of what they and their skills, they're good at what they do. Do you think they have to be brilliant at everything, or do you think you could have a really good manager that's actually honest about, you know, I'm not so great on the detail, but so-and-so's going to sort of top and tail everything and just check through it, but actually what I'm great about is driving this project through. Would you still trust them if they're not fantastic at competent in every area, or do you expect very high standards of your leaders?
No, I think like like if someone has an area where it also actually within the team would show that, well, actually, no, I'm quite good at that, or someone's quite good at that, where they can pick up on it, and that's the point of the team.
Did you do Johari's window in your reflective practice?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, because that's the sort of bit where you know what you know, sort of like you know what you're good at, and almost you share with other people the bits that you're not necessarily so good at. But by doing that, I think this competence as a whole, they need to be brilliant, really. But yeah, not necessarily everything. That's why you've got a team, so that's good. Is there any of this you disagree with? Do you think it's a sort of good benchmark for what we should expect of our managers and leaders? Okay, let's do a little quiz then, just see if anyone's still there. Let's swap the words for other things. So instead of able, what could you use on this one? It doesn't have to be an A, so what other word could you use?
Capability.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so believable, what could we replace that with?
Honest.
Yeah, I think that we started off with that. I was almost gobsmacked when you said that, and I'm sorry because I just think it's such a good point to make, and it's absolutely honest. Connected, could we replace that one with?
Is that like communication to me?
Or empathy, I suppose, can we? We've got empathy in it, but yeah, caring. And then instead of dependability, dependable.
Passionate.
Okay, yeah. Passionate, organised, responsive, they do what they say we're going to do. There's something about it as well that's got longevity, isn't it? So it's not just a one-off. There's something on this, but they do it. It's time and time again, isn't it? So deliver with a passion and time again. I love this one. I think it's a really good way of almost benchmarking someone's behaviours. So I think this ties off really nicely, this assignment. So with this one, we're looking at professionalism, mutual trust, respect and support. So you can talk about things like, about sort of leading, about the energy that we've got, how we're empowering our team. So all these things you could pick up on. Do two again. And I always say, like, if just picking two seems to work well for the word counts, because you've got, say, 200 words for each one, so probably about 2 paragraphs for each one. And you can explain it and then you can apply it, which I think works really well for this. I'd probably go A, B, C, D and 5 dysfunctions of a team for this one, and then talk about how it builds this professionalism, trust, respect and support, and reflect on your team and how it works, and maybe where there's a shortfall if needs be, or if you feel there is one. Would you feel all right with doing that? We're doing this taking sides.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
it's fine.
So we've got, with this assignment.
Sorry, Hannah, I was a bit slow on the button there. Did you say just talk through the A, B, C, D, and then and sort of reflect that to your own team? Is that what
yeah, so I'm saying for this one, so this is for 3.4, final one. It isn't it's 750 words divided by 2 because you've got 2 bits to it. So we've got roughly 4 paragraphs, I think, to this. So I would pick, if I was you, I'd go A, B, C, D, explain, 1 paragraph, A, B, C, D, apply to your team. And then I'd do 5 functions, or not the 5, the 5 high characteristics, Laconis. I'd do that, explain, and then apply. And that's this done. I think that's these, or if you prefer, you could talk about mutual trust, or you could focus on one of these, self-belief, empowerment, if you wanted. So you'd talk about it in principle and then apply it to your team. What I've tended to do on this is I work out which I think are the most straightforward ones and then give you everything you need. So you've got those and then you just apply it.
Is it definitely 750 words? Just because the template you gave us at the very beginning, it does say 400 to 500 words for this section. So I don't want to just write too much and then have to cut it out.
And you won't have to, but I'm just going to go to, as you can see everything, can't you? So I'll go to the marking criteria in my template. So let's just go to my teaching. Assessment template, and let's go assessment booklet, which is where the word count comes from. Flick. Oh, I know it's 450 words, and this one is getting smaller and smaller, isn't it? Let's have a look. Right, so it's 450 words. I'm sorry, I'll update Rob. Oh wait, because you've started using it now.
That's no worries. Yeah.
No,
I mean, it's in the breakdown you've written for us anyway, because after every question, you've kind of given us guidance on how many words we need to do.
Yeah, and you can go up or down, but yeah, 450 words. That's still approximately 4 paragraphs.
Yeah. Cool.
So just in terms of going through this, so we've got. Should just go end to end through the assignment with you, just to make sure that you're all comfortable. Would that be a useful way of wrapping up?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
That'd be good.
so.
Okay, let's do it.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, right. So starting off with the legal status on the governance of organisations. Can you remember the sorts of things we were talking about there? I can if you can't, but let's see what you remember from this.
So it was like the legal statuses, wasn't it? The public sector, the public limited company, and
yeah,
stuff like that.
So remember what? So we'd got private or public companies, and that was whether. So we've got companies that are basically for profit. So basically they have shareholders, and there's either private ones or there's public ones. Public ones are owned, we can buy shares in ourselves. Private ones you can't. Or we've got a charity. So a charity has got a different way of how it's constructed. So which of you work for private limited companies? Because some of you do, don't you?
I think that's all of us, to be honest.
Okay.
Kia's public, I think. Public.
Yeah.
Is it? So you can buy shares in it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. So if you can buy shares in it, they have to be a lot more transparent. They have to put annual statements on their account, on their like make them available to everybody, like their shareholders and things. If it's a small private company, if it's a small partnership, we don't have to. So basically, or we could even be a sole trader. So we can go from, there's levels of complexity on this. So basically, sole trader is the easiest thing. So we could sell our wax melts on a weekend. We haven't got a registered company, but we submit our numbers to the government, HMRC, and they'll tax us. That's the least structured way. It's really low in terms of regulation, but it sort of works for quite small businesses. And then you start to go up the food chain, really. You've got your private companies that have a couple of, can have one owner or more, but they still have to submit their figures because they're a limited company to Companies House, and they still can get audited, but it's very rare. What the government is interested in, so the governance, is bigger organisations, because they've got the potential to do things that are more significant in terms of potentially not paying taxes, or that seems to be the main one, or sort of behaving in an inappropriate way. So we've got public limited companies, charities, they're all audited, and they all produce financial statements that are publicly available, and that's because of their size and their significance. So actually the governing of them is far more stringent because of the impact of them. Does that make sense? So we've obviously got a lot more words in your sort of support sheet on this, and I've put information about each type, but that's ultimately, we're going from really simple to more complex. The reason it's more complex is because it's got more serious implications for the government. Okay, if we move on.
Yep.
Just a whistle-stop tour. The purpose of an organisation's mission and vision. Which comes first?
I don't know.
Mission?
Yeah. Mission, yeah.
Would you? So a mission is what then?
That's the purpose, isn't it?
Yeah, a mission is what we're about, and the vision is where we're going. So how are they useful? Why are they used?
Can be used as a measure. So if you say you're going to do something, then you can measure against it whether you've achieved it or not.
Absolutely, publicly, you put yourself out there by doing this, aren't you? Because you're saying this story out by saying what we're about. So it is a public measure of perception. It also should actually inform your strategic sort of almost alignment. And there's something called a golden thread where it goes from where you want to be at, your vision, through to your mission, through to your operations. And actually everything should be clearly aligned. And even by looking at your mission and vision, your customers will know if they're right for you, your potential staff. You know, it's a clear way of differentiating the heart, the DNA of your organisation. It's most sort of fundamental. That's what it should be about. So it should be, because I think I've given you some examples. They're really hard to guess as well, because quite often organisations don't use it to differentiate themselves, but it should be. So next bit. This is whistle stop, and I'm sorry, but hopefully slightly helpful. Organisational structures. Do you remember what there were two main types of structures that organisations can have?
You have matrix, flat, tall.
Yeah, so yeah, flat and tall, and then you've got your matrix, so it's a bit more complicated. As a manager, what would be good about being in a tall organisation?
There's more room for development.
Yeah, we've got all the sort of scope. You can get progression quite easily. Yeah, what might be a disadvantage?
It's easier to get the sack.
It really is. And you know what? They just go in the pyramids, don't they? Just go, let's slice a chunk out that pyramid, and it just drops down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, so there tends to be quite a lot of restructures when you've got quite a tall hierarchy, and they just like regrade you or reband you, don't they? What about a flatter structure? What would the benefit be for working for an organisation with a flatter structure?
Greater control and better decision making by the managers.
Yeah, so you're more closely aligned, aren't you, to actually what you're doing? And what might the negatives be?
No progression.
Yeah, basically, there's nowhere to go. And actually, the progression will probably be sold to you in the way that you'll get an additional responsibility, but you don't really get any more money for it. Or, you know, it's like expanding your knowledge. And yeah, you tend to be saddled with quite a lot, actually. But if you like a variety in things, it can work quite well. Now, the matrix structure, how does that work? And that tends to be what a lot of organisations use now, to be sort of really lean. How many people would you report to if you're in a matrix organisation?
So you could report to a couple of people from different areas of the business.
Yeah, it could sit within a tall or a flat one, so it doesn't have to be a separate one. But yeah, you could end up doing a part role for sort of quality, and then you're also working for a particular project. And that can be really stressful, because actually who comes first? Because actually they've both got an equal say in it. It's a tricky one, that is. But because organisations want to use their staff to the fullest, and actually, you know, in terms of communication, it seems to be a natural way. Or you could be working on you sort of almost connecting different areas, but that then presents that conflict as to authority. So that's where the sort of matrix comes in. Okay, so discuss the impact of organisations' values, ethics on management decision making. So how are we seeing the values and ethics of the organisation? Where do you see them? How are they instilled in you?
In our performance management.
Are they?
Yeah, so like 50% of our score is behaviours, and yeah, it's behaviours.
And is that aligned to the values then? Have they got?
Yeah, it's like our God, sorry, my brain is dead. It's like our 5 values, and I don't know, like imperatives. That's the word. Yeah. So we have a list of imperatives and then behaviours that back those up, and we have to say how we contribute to it and how we've demonstrated the behaviours doing so, and that's part of our performance review.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a perfect alignment, isn't it? And then this, what I'm sort of getting at is just what's the alignment between the established values and behaviours they're expecting, and how then are they translated through to the way that you physically manage? And actually, if you're scored on them, you know, that's the perfect alignment, isn't it? And that's And actually you recruited based on them as well.
Yeah, I think you have to demonstrate it in your interview. So they'll be like, give me an example where you've done this with this.
So I think for everybody that should be fairly straightforward. That's like the best practice. That's the way everything's moving now, is it's more values led, and actually we see them at every touch point. So from the point you enter into the organisation through to all the training and development through to performance management. So then it does, in terms of the alignment on management decision making, it should be really straightforward, because it's, you know, it's what's expected of you. So that was looking internally at the organisation, so looking at how that's going to impact you as a manager, really. We then looked at management and leadership theories. So let's see what we can remember and get my things out on that. What's the difference between management and leadership? 2.1.
I've always thought the manager is more the sort of day-to-day, get stuff done, and then the leader has a bit more of an overview, a bit more long-term forecast look at things.
Yep, so more strategic, aren't they, in terms of what they're doing? When I've written articles on this for sort of online courses I've written, the manager tends to be task focused. The leader is meant to be more people focused in the really pure definition, because they're more charismatic and actually buy into a leader, whereas you do what a manager says you should do, more for sort of making it happen. In terms of management and leadership styles, where's my information? Okay. Do you remember the management? Do you remember there was a grid? Country management was one of them. Country club management. Do you remember any of these?
Was this the autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire?
Yes, that was one of them, because I can remember some of the pictures on that slide. So they were the three main ones. So autocratic is what type of person? Do you remember the sort of person on the slide?
A manager who dictates and is very prescriptive and is not seen as part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. What's a democratic manager like?
So they're the opposite, and they're very team driven and don't dictate, but provide guidance and allow the team to make decisions.
And try and facilitate it. And then you've got laissez-faire. So what sort of, how are they going to be to work for?
Just get on with it, laid back.
You're not going to get much guidance from them unless you want. You know, they might help you if you want it. They're sort of very much, you're trusted to get on with it, which actually, if you're quite self-starting, might suit you to the, you know, down to the ground. But sometimes you might feel like you're not given any direction. So we'd got that. There was also another grid which had, as I mentioned, this country club. There were 4 things, and there was one, a middle road management in the middle, and they were all based on whether you were task or whether you're people centred. And actually, the highest performance one manages to be both. The idea with that as well, I think with all of these, then you're not actually going to stay in the same place all the time. So I think with these, analyse the impact management and leadership styles. Pick 2 models again. So either pick, you know, the autocratic, laissez-faire, democratic. There was a continuum, you know, the selling, it was telling at the front, telling, selling, involving. You sort of went that was another one. You've got quite a few to choose from there. Pick 2, apply them to your organisation. Right, culture and values. Do you remember? I saw somebody show me their work a couple of days ago on culture, which was very, very good. Can you remember what the any of the sort of cultural models were that we looked at?
Just one quick question. When you say apply it to the organisation, are we meant to be doing that throughout then? Are we meant to be referring it back to the company we work for?
I'd like you to, or your role, or your previous experience of a role. But I think if you can do it and then put some sort of like how I've seen this in practice is, that'd be really good.
Okay.
Because all of these, they are work-based. So if you've got the knowledge and then you demonstrate in the application, it sort of shows that you've been involved in it. So that would be excellent if you could.
I just find it really hard with the word count.
In terms of it. Well, do you know what? You don't have to. You could just apply it rather than describe it. Honestly, because by applying it, you're showing you understand it.
Okay.
So if that helps you, if that cuts out a couple of paragraphs and you just want to talk about the application of it, do that instead. That is absolutely brilliant.
Okay, look.
Yeah, so if that shortcuts that. Okay, so 2.3, we're talking culture and values. Anyone remember any of the cultural? There were 2 culture things that we talked about. Something that a spider makes.
Is it the cultural web?
Yay! So that was this idea that we have a way that we see the business, the paradigm, I'm not sure how you say it, the paradigm, I think. And that's how we see the organisation, and that's through various constituents. So we've got the stories, we've got the rituals, we've got the hierarchy, we've got the informal power, I think as well. They're not quite all the words, but they all interlink. And what I love about the cultural web is if you want to change the culture, you can actually identify which bits you need to fiddle with. And actually even things like changing the stories, changing the physical symbols was another one. It's a good way of deconstructing something that's impossible to construct, because a culture is simply, you know, how we do things around here. So having a way of looking at that is amazing. Now there was, do you remember Handy? Okay, it was somebody called Handy actually. Do you remember the 4? They were like Greek. Ring any bells? 4 different cultures.
Nope, I'm having a blank.
Well, that's all right then, at least you're speaking to me, I don't mind. So Handy had 4 different cultural types. There were things like, there were, I think there was the role, there's the task culture. They're basically 4, and even within organisations, you could have different cultures there. So you could actually look at both of those, or you could just look at either cultural web or Handies, but also try and find out your organisation's values if you can, and discuss how that will impact managers who work there and leaders. Are they recruited based on those values? You know, how's the culture? So we're sort of connecting these models with actually how people manage and lead in your organisation. And if you want to just apply it, yeah, as I say, you don't have to describe it, but you might just want to apply it. I think that one's a little bit of a tricky one. Someone shared me, had some questions on that, and I do understand they did it absolutely brilliantly, really, really well applied. So just, and on the cultural web, you could just try a couple of them. You don't have to do every single one if you want, but at least it shows an effort to really understand how it's used to create the culture, or to articulate the culture. Then 2.4, how managers and leaders adapt in different leadership situations. Do you remember the situational leadership? So this idea that we can flex it if we need to. So there was, on this one, there was a model that we looked at, which was almost back to that quadrant of the different types of leaders. So if we need to just make it happen, we're going to have to behave in one way. But there was also, when you look at the words to describe what you need to do on this, it's also about responding to things that might happen. So for example, COVID, how you need to adapt. And also it might be innovation, it might be a change in objectives, it might be that you 2-bid across. So it's just about really understanding how a situation might change, and then how, as a manager or leader, to be good, you've got to be agile. A good manager or leader needs to switch their behaviours according to the situation and challenges they're facing. This does all tie in with I've got the notes in front of me. Okay, and then memory test for today. I really hope so you can remember something. So were you all right with learning outcome 2? Management and leadership theories.
Yeah, I think those ones were a bit trickier than what we've done today, isn't it? Because obviously it's theory.
Today it's really straightforward. It's almost,
yeah. Today was pretty much
it's what you do.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
And even if you don't, it's stuff you see, and it's almost like you can always flip it if you want to make the assignment interesting, and things that are done badly and why they're done, you know, or sort of, you can either do best practice, or you can also sometimes talk about where it hasn't quite worked. But I sort of get the impression of that. Number 1 is more like fact finding, sort of in terms of the legal bits, and sort of looking big picture. As I say, number 2, the last session, was more theories and models, wasn't it? And then today is more practically how do managers and leaders actually get on and do it. then we end with obviously like looking at how we build trust. And I think the ABCD model is a really nice framework. I think behaviours are very, very difficult to measure though, because it's the consistency, isn't it? People can do it once, but are they going to do it consistently, which is the dependability of the ABCD, isn't it? So whilst we're all together, any questions that anyone has?
I don't